Welcome, everyone. It's the last Wednesday of the month in January of 2026 already, and Troy Love is joining me. And we are here. Troy is gifted at talking about attachment wounds, the voices of shame. His work has been instrumental, helpful for me, but helpful for so many people. If you're just joining this on our YouTube channel, we would invite you to come join the live webinar so that you can ask questions of Troy or any of the other hosts that are on this. I will also mention two other things. I'll put a little plug in for Troy. He does a Friday morning drop-in group for men, and it is it is for male addicts, and it is about attachment wounds. And so his drop-in group is a little different than some of the others. But I would invite you. You can go sit in on it. You don't have to be the participant in that week, and he can tell a little bit more about that if you'd like. But it's also really helpful information. I hear from I do hear from people that have participated, and they find it really helpful. The other thing Troy does is online work groups, and what those are 6-week courses, and they're offered at different periods throughout the year. But these are work groups for, in this particular case, for men, and it will be the deeper dive into attachment wounds, and more of that, a little more personalized. It's not therapy, but a little more personalized, that you can ask questions about your specific situation, but getting that foundation of information about attachment wounds, that can help you move forward on things. So those are opportunities. You'll find them on seekingintegrity.com. Anything to add to that, Troy, before we move on to, we have a
No, thank
question.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
no, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, I'm the betrayed, married for 16 years. We have 3 kids. I asked my husband to leave 2 years ago, I'm sorry, because my husband broke a boundary of letting me know where he acts out within 20, when he, goodness, I got to breathe better. Let me start over. I'm so sorry. I'm the betrayed, married for 16 years. We have 3 kids. I asked my husband to leave 2 years ago because my husband broke a boundary of letting me know when he acts out within 24 hours. He is in active addiction, and we have had disclosure 4 years ago while he had a point of sobriety, not recovery. So I know what he is up to, and it's really, really painful for me. Would the pain lessen if we divorce? I'm in recovery and have um, a life separate of him, but the idea of what he is doing is hurting me so much. Oh, thank you for sharing this. I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad you're here. So, Troy,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
So there's a lot of things that come up for me. I don't know how old you said you've been married for 16 years, but I don't know how old the kids are. Obviously, I'm making some assumptions, but they're probably in their teens and early preteen age. So it's also not clear whether he is still living with you or if you two are separated but married. So because I'm looking at like how that would how the kids and the custody arrangement and all of that would be managed. Because I'm making the assumption that you still have teenagers and preteens, you still are going to be connected to him until the children are grown, and then even then, like when they have weddings and other things, there's still connection. So the the you're asking whether or not the pain would lessen if you got a divorce, and I don't know. I can tell you that divorce is painful in and of itself, having gone through it myself, and we had a really amicable divorce, but there's still pain around that. There is some feeling of clarity, I think, sometimes for the person who's decided to make choose to follow through with divorce because they've made a decision and things are now separated and it's really clear about where boundaries are, and you don't have to be as worried about whether he is acting out or not because you're not connected to him in that way. So in some ways that might create some distance for you and him, but on the other hand, because you have kids, you're still going to be worried about whether he's acting out, and you're still going to be worried about that stuff. So I can't say definitively whether it will lessen what we get asked a lot of times. Well, how do I know when it's the right time to divorce somebody? And there's some podcasts that uh, that Tammy can put that's come up around that. But the honest answer is, you know, when you know, like there's this feeling that comes across that says, okay, like I think it is the right time. And when that happens, there's a sense of peace that comes across with that decision, even though, you know, splitting assets and all that stuff and figuring out custody, and depending on how conflictual of a divorce it is painful. There's all, but there is a sense of peace, like I'm making the right decision for me. So when we look at the attachment wounds, loss is definitely going to be a part of that, regardless of whether you stay or go. Rejection is still a part of that. Betrayal is still a part of that. So the wounds in and of themselves are still there. Um, so I don't know if the decision to get divorced is going to be that like salve that will soothe that, but it may help you feel like you have a little bit more power and clarity in your life. So uh, it can't give black and white, but those are my thoughts.
I was frantically digging for resources. So I put and I shared this one often, but it was such a good series, and it was a 4-part webinar. I wrote a blog because I was sharing the links all the time. It was, should I stay or should I go? So if you're watching this on YouTube, either email tami@seekingintegrity.com or search blogs for should I stay or go. Anyway, but we did 4, and one of them was Kristen Snowden's, and she talked about Dr. John Gottman's. We pulled some questions out of there, and it was 10 questions. And it's really helpful. I often say for couples, like each of you do this. If you're both 80% in, then great. Let's work on fixing things so that we can move forward. On that. If it's like, well, I'm 10% in, that's really good information for you to know. And there's no judgment on that. The next one was 2 partners. One stayed, one left. They share their journey. And then the next one was Deborah Doak did on mediation, navigating the separation process. And then the final one was about, divorce. We also had one, Arlene Rosen, it's not in that webinar, that was later, about collaborative divorce. So we have all of this stuff. And guess what? It's just information. I love what Troy was saying, when you know. And I have seen, partners in this particular case, it's partners that I'm thinking of, where they're going like their head is saying you should go, but my heart is going, I'm still connected. And when those two things align, whatever direction they do, then there's a decision and they have clarity. There's grief, and I put the Debbie McCrae's grief and loss webinar, because there's grief anytime you make a choice. If you make a decision, it's, I think it comes from the Greek of incise or whatever, but you're cutting something away. If you choose this, you're not choosing this. So there's grief of, if you're in the in between and you're like, you can't decide, guess what? You haven't given up anything, but you're also not moving forward on any path, so it's really challenging. And it's your time frame. There's no right time frame. We did a webinar with Carolyn, and we don't have that one recorded. We did not have permission to, because she did the betrayal series on the betrayal podcast. But she talked about in her group, it was so helpful because she made a decision to move quickly, and she was like, oh, maybe I did it too fast. And someone else in that particular group talked about, I think I waited too long. And so you can see that there's whatever time frame it is for you, there's probably going to be some second guessing, but at some point, if you make a decision, then it's your timing, and it's a different path. I did put some more resources. The Moving On Alone drop-in group is on Thursdays. That's the link to all of the drop-in groups. So Troy's on Friday is also there. There's a whole bunch of them. But the Moving On Alone is a unique drop-in group for partners in that the focus is not on necessarily staying. So it's I've left, I've been left, or I have one foot out the door. So it's a different focus. And to Troy's point, yes, you will co-parent. We're grandparents. You will co-grandparent. So how do you do that? Um, One more, and I didn't put this in there, but Dr. Rob does a one-time 2-hour expert consultation, and he is really good at discerning what's going on. And it's can be validating for partners. Sometimes it's the nudge an addict needs to, the hope and nudge that the addict needs to go, oh, there is hope, or I'm really going to lose this. No addict changes until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. And it sounds like your addict partner is in the, well, this is working for me. I can kind of do what I want and whatever, but it's painful for you, and I hear that. Um, I was just talking to a partner earlier this week, and this person had left and it was still so painful. And to me, I'm like, well, of course, just getting rid of the addict doesn't take away the pain. There's still the grief process. Now it's the loss of the relationship you hoped you had, which is true even now. Loss of the husband you hoped he would be, loss of the family, all of those things. Those are kind of that secondary level, like it's the losses that people don't often talk about or think about. So, but that doesn't mean you have to get stuck in that. Whatever you choose to do, there's lots of resources to help you come through that. The expert consultation is a one-time 2-hour for couples with Dr. Rob. If you want information, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. I can tell you more about that. But it's a tough place, and especially when it's been 2 years since that particular thing, and he's not choosing to do something different. So healthy boundaries. You've missed two of them now. Otherwise, I would really be encouraging you to join the Healthy Boundaries work group with Debbie McCrae. There will be more, and those are on the work group tab. I'll pull that in a moment. But your internal boundaries, your boundaries, and I heard you have boundaries, so I'm not, but understanding, I'm holding these boundaries, and what this person is doing or not doing, I'm not going to betray myself, with all of that too. So, okay, let's see the next one. I've read and heard you say that our connections break, we break. Oh, that we probably when our connections break, we break. What does that mean actually? Does that come from codependence model? How does that look, this break? Because when I want to leave or when we argue, I am the betrayed. I start to feel anxious, nervous, and I cannot function anymore.
Love that question, by the way. Thank you. So we are wired as humans for connection biologically, socially, spiritually, energetically. And when those connections break, we break. So I'm sitting with that question. I'm like, how can I explain that? So it's kind of like our containment, our safety, all of that shatters, and it automatically puts us in the fight or flight response. When Because we are wired to be connected, when somebody rejects us or somebody betrays us or somebody lies to us or somebody leaves and disappears, or even if somebody dies, right? Those are painful experiences. And depending on the severity or how often it happens, it can create wounds that then are part of our experience. But when a wound gets hit, what that does is it activates our amygdala in our brain. And our amygdala is this little almond shaped part of our brain that is it's like the alarm when the alarm system in your house is turned on or somewhere. It's like the little sensor up in the top corner that senses movement. It's not a camera, so it can't see what it is. It just senses movement, and then it automatically sends the signal that something bad's happening. So it can't tell whether it's somebody who lives in the house who forgot to turn the alarm off. It can't tell whether it's a pet or anything. It just sees, oh, something's happened, and it sends the signal. And that's what happens with this. So it's not necessarily part of the prodependence model. It's more of like the attachment theory model, which prodependence is woven into that. But it's part of how we're wired to be together. So when you want to leave because you probably don't feel safe, or when you argue and that doesn't feel safe, your amygdala is pushing a button saying things are, I don't feel safe, I don't feel safe, and it wants to go into the fight or flight response. And so your body is reacting that way outside of your control. That is something biologically that our body does, because it it our nervous system has really one job, and that is to keep us safe. And so when things are not safe, it's going to signal things are not right here. Something needs to be fixed. So if you keep being flooded every time you go into the fight or flight response, and what happens in your brain is all the blood in your prefrontal cortex goes away, which is our executive functioning part of our brain, where we make decisions, where we are able to manage our emotions, we're able to think through things. All of that really goes away and goes to our heart and our lungs and our biceps and our quads, so we can get out of there because it thinks that we're facing a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. We're not functioning very well. And so what we have to do is breathe and get ourselves grounded. There's some tools that we can use to turn that part of our brain back on, and we can make better decisions. But if it's happening a lot, or if those wounds are pretty deep, then it makes sense that you immediately feel that panicky feeling. So um, hopefully hopefully you have a therapist, and or you're attending some groups where you can learn some of those tools to manage and help regulate yourself when you get triggered, because uh, that's a normal part of what happens when we don't feel safe.
Yeah, and I love that Troy was talking about, work with a qualified professional, because those, uh, Dr. Robbins says often, feelings are not facts. But when it's that overwhelming, when you feel like I can't function, that's a level, like it would be probably difficult to go, this is only a feeling and I'm feeling anxious or whatever. So if, we've talked often about like EMDR and some other things. There may be something somatic that your qualified professional can help you do. EMDR is a technique, somatic experience is a technique that are to help reduce trauma. So Dr. Eddie Caparucci has a book for inner child work for betrayed partners specifically. That might be interesting. There's opportunities to kind of, it's a little workbook kind of thing where you can write a few sentences. There may be insights. Troy's work, Finding Peace, he's got a Finding Peace workbook. And, both of them, I think especially are, they're so good. And I think all of it is really complementary. And you can look at inner child, you can look at attachment wounds and all of those things. But the challenge, what I hear is I want to leave, but my feelings, this deep fear and anxiety is keeping me stuck in a situation that I don't want to be stuck in. So reaching out and getting qualified help, to support you on that journey, could be useful. One of the things we talk about this a lot, but journaling, because journaling, if you're doing like just dumping, like, in that moment, what is my greatest fear? What is my anxiety? What is all of this? And then maybe when you're not in those moments, what is my goal? At the end of, we're in January, we're almost at the end of January, but what would you vision for your life, by the end of this year? If you could plan it out, and I think sometimes having that picture of this is what I'd like to move towards. And so here's where I am and here's where I want to go. And then it's kind of practical. And what Troy was talking about is getting it in your executive brain where you're thinking, like, okay, then what steps do I need to take if I'm here and I want to get there? And that can take it a little bit out of those, intense feelings. I'm not saying this is perfect, but there's so many things to try. And I'm glad you're here, and I hope you keep trying, because if this doesn't work, try something else, but don't, well, I would encourage you not to, to give up. Lots of people do, but you're here. So I'm hopeful for you that you're going to move through this. And that's what it is, moving through. You don't get it passed. You don't shove it in the closet. You move through this. Okay. So the next question, comment. Did Troy say he went through divorce? I think it's empowering when personal real stories are shared.
I did. My wife and I had been married for 25 years, and um, for the first 10 years of our marriage, she was dealing with the betrayal. I was definitely in my addiction, and then was able to finally get into recovery and and became sober, which was good. Um, and then that's when I really started to understand the attachment wounds, because I thought that me being sober was going to be the fix everything and we'd all be good. And that turned out not to be the case, because what I learned is that I had taken my one and only coping strategy away. And I then didn't have the ability to deal with when I was feeling rejected and when I was feeling abandoned, which those were my two biggest wounds. And so then I realized I had more work to do. And so we both did a lot of work. We did couples counseling. We both went to therapy and all those kind of things. And we came to a place where we realized we care about each other, but we aren't in love with each other. And so we made the decision to get divorced. So we got divorced the day before the world shut down in March
Mm,
2020. And then because of all that craziness, we ended up staying together until she moved out. She actually moved to Tennessee in June of this year to be closer to where my daughter lives. So, and when I went to visit them in December, I actually stayed at my ex's house. So we're friends, and ours was amicable. We care about each other, but we realized that we we weren't in love with each other, and we wanted to give space for us to maybe find a person that we could love. So um, I will tell you that even though it was amicable and all that, there was still a lot of pain and a lot of shame, a ton
mm.
of shame about, especially as a therapist, you're supposed to help people with their relationships. And boy, does my judge have a lot to say about that. Um, but also just like in my faith practice and the shame around that. And um, so there was a lot to work through. And so I don't wish it on anybody, uh, because it is a painful experience.
And I hear you. And what I hear is um, compassion for each other and the friendship and the relationship that you're able to maintain.
Mhm.
I had the opposite experience. So I mean, a really long time ago. But like I love that you guys can, co-parent, co-grandparent, and do it in, from a friendship and caring, caring manner. That's a I know it was painful. I hear that, but I also hear, if it has to happen, wow, what a great model for doing it. For everybody's sake. Your new baby grandson is going to benefit from this. Your kid, I mean, everybody. Like, you're still the support team for it. I mean, wow, that's awesome.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Lincoln, back to yours. Hi, I'm the betrayed. I've been married for 11 years and we have a 5 and 6 year old. I found out about my husband's porn addiction 2 years ago. He found a coach and has been working with him. However, I learned 2 months ago he actually has a sex addiction and has been visiting massage parlors and sex workers for the past 10 years. he wasn't honest with his coach and says now he was not ready 2 years ago. He recently started therapy with a CSAT and has also begun the 12 steps. I am also working with a CSAT on the betrayal trauma. I have triggers almost daily and worried I will never be able to recover and reconcile. My therapist recommended EMDR therapy. Do you recommend that approach? Well, it's so funny. I didn't read this question, so I just said, if so, would you recommend an intensive or weekly session? So while Troy answers that, I'm going to go put some more resources in for you guys that will help supplement what you're doing. Okay.
Yep. So EMDR is a form of trauma treatment, and you definitely have gone through some trauma. There's a lot of betrayal going on around that. And so what EMDR does is helps us process the trauma relatively quickly. It's not like magic, but we're able to process some pretty intense traumatic experiences relatively quickly. And so it's one of the most researched forms of trauma treatment that's out there. So it's not going to hurt you to do it. For some people, it doesn't work, meaning uh, they, for whatever reason, like some people, they can't focus that long, and other people, it just isn't the approach for them, but it doesn't cause them harm to do it. So I don't know what you mean by intensive or weekly sessions. They don't. I mean, most of the time, as far as I know, I'm an EMDR therapist, but most of the EMDR therapists I know, they don't do it in intensive ways. Like you don't do it all day long for a 2 weeks or something. It usually is an hour a week, because part of what happens with that is EMDR helps your brain process the trauma, but when the session's over, that doesn't mean your brain is done processing it. So it usually takes a couple of days for your brain to continue processing the what's going on and kind of making sense of that stuff. And so uh, I haven't really heard of anything where they would do that like in an intensive. Maybe they would do EMDR every day, but there's still a break. So I don't know your situation, but I would say weekly sessions are probably more than adequate for you. I'm glad that you and your husband are both getting some help, and I'm hoping that he is in a place where he's willing to be honest. That is one of the hardest parts about this, is that you thought he was, and then you found out he wasn't, and so that just rips the betrayal wound right open again, and it causes a lot of distress for you. So but EMDR, great approach. Brain spotting is like a cousin to EMDR, and so that some people use that as another way to do that. But both of those are ways to help process the trauma relatively quickly with minimal distress as you're walking through it.
And you can probably speak to this too, but I've done EMDR, on me. I didn't do it on me. My therapist did it on me. Sorry, let me clarify. But because I had a thing that was coming up and it was not working for me, and she did. And I'm not saying this is the same for. I was really willing to let this go because it was really not serving me, and I knew it. And so she said, "Let's try EMDR." And what I loved about that was she worked on the issue, but she also then gave me, I'm going to call it a replacement, thought or vision. And I've noticed every time something that comes up on that messaging, that negative messaging, it is immediately replaced with the replacement. And I've recognized that. I was like, oh, I was going to go over here, but this gave me the opportunity to go here. And so I haven't had to go, into that other area. It's non-invasive, it is definitely worth trying, even if it helps calm things down. I put the work groups in. The Betrayed Partner work group starts on the 4th of February. The Sex Addiction 101 would be great for him. Many CSAT therapists recommend these for their clients because this is not what you don't get this in therapy. So, like I said, with Troy's work group, that's deeper work. So, not yet for your husband, but one of the things these help you get foundational components. And I know that he was frittering around for a while, but the reality is you're 2 months in. So this is very early for you because you just had another big slam of betrayal. Here you thought things were, going better. So, and I hear him not being ready yet. I'm not making excuses for him, but I'm hopeful that now that he is. I also put in the chat the navigating the 12 steps, 90 meetings in 90 days. There's a reason why it's recommended because you're trying to replace things. Our drop-in groups, we've got a number of them, including Troy's, on Friday for him, and separate for you. There's a betrayed partner drop-in groups too. Those are all free. Dr. Rob's Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast has at this time had about 3 million downloads. Great content on there. And then Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction, again, free. We have over 1,300 hours of videos on our YouTube channel, every topic imaginable, including a lot of Troy's, throughout the bunch of years we've been doing this, so there's a number of things. So lean into the resources. I've had people that are like, I listen to a podcast and just, that helps me calm down, probably from the standpoint of there is help. I'm not alone. Whatever works, you try things, and see what works for you. Debbie McCrae, she has talked about betrayed partners having an emergency kit of like, if I'm dysregulated, then these are the 5 things I'm going to do. And, she talks about having, one in your purse and one in your car and one in whatever. And it's just, I always say, I always have my phone with me, have it on my phone so I can pull it up and go, that's what I'm going to do, and try something. Even if you're in the grocery store, you can do a breathing exercise. So it's finding some things that will help you stay regulated, because that's the challenge with this is it's so dysregulating that you can't get to your thinking part of your brain. It's that scared and reactive part. And so, all of this is not going to take any of the stuff away, but giving you the grounding so that, you go, just for today, this is what I'm going to do, and that can help you move through it too. So, okay, next one. Betrayed partner here, married 50 years, lifetime of porn, discovery of many and disturbing sexual addictions, including prostitution and blatant objectification and stalking. 17 months in recovery, in quotes, constant relapse and deception. So that would not be recovery. I am trying to heal. We have separated while working on healing. Problem is that after being with him since we were 16 years old, I'm extremely attached to my husband. It feels like physically being ripped apart. We are accustomed to spending time together all day, most days, and we end up breaking the separation prematurely. I've talked with others who have had this situation, mostly decide to stay living together in substandard state of recovery. Question is, can true healing and recovery take place while living and loving each other, or will the betrayer keep betraying because he believes I'm not going anywhere? Wow, thank you for sharing this. That's I hear all the complexities and nuances with that. So, what are
Mm.
your thoughts?
Let me start with the very last question. Will the betrayer keep betraying because he believes I'm not going anywhere? Again, I don't know your partner, but that isn't the number one reason why betrayers keep betraying. There is maybe a sense of like, if there's not going to be any boundaries around this, then I just can keep doing it. If there's not going to be any consequences, who cares? And there is a component to that, but that isn't the primary reason. The biggest reason is because they are not dealing with their pain and their wounds in a way where they're being honest with themselves first and others second. They're not dealing with that, so they keep turning to those behaviors to deal with their woundedness, and that would happen whether you stayed or left. Uh, Sometimes the threat that somebody's going to leave prompts the person to go into recovery, or they're like, oh my gosh, my wife's going to leave me. And so they go to therapy and they do all the things. But that doesn't last. Like, that's not enough of a lever to keep the person in recovery. They eventually they have to learn how to be in recovery for themselves. Um, so whether you decide to stay or go, they have decisions that they have to make about their own recovery. I hear how much you love your partner. I mean, you've been together for 50 years. That's a long time. Um, and I don't know, I don't know what kind of work he's done. And the world has changed a lot over the last 50 years. We know so much more, especially in maybe this last 10 years, about porn and what it does to the brain and things that we didn't know before. And we continue to find new ways of helping treat those kind of things that we didn't have even 5 years ago. So there's lots of things that can be done to help. At the same time, I hear like, okay, so I decide to stay. I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like to be with somebody for 50 years and your whole life would be upended. Uh, Grandkids and uh, depending on your financial situation, a lot of times the husband was the primary financial person, and now like how am I going to support myself, and all those legitimate questions come up. And so then the question is, well, then did I I'm living in a substandard state of recovery. That's so hard to to be in that place. What I'm hoping, and hope is not a strategy, but what I'm hoping is if he is able to really do work, and I can't tell you how many guys, I'm so surprised, honestly, how many guys in their 70s, late 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Sometimes I had a guy who was 80 years old who wanted to work on recovery. And that I was like, wow, that is amazing that they're willing to do that. And they get better. um, they learn how to do things. And so if that could happen, then some of these wounds would um, be cared for. And maybe the next 50 years of your marriage will be better than the first half. So um, I I don't know if I answered your question, but he keeps acting out because he hasn't learned a different way of doing that. It's not necessarily because he doesn't think that he believes you're just going to tolerate it.
And so I just put, we have a residential treatment program for guys like him, and we've had guys over 80, multiple, like, so it's not too late for him if he chooses, to get that level of help. And here's the other thing, you know at some point there are partners who and I don't know exactly how they do it, but they kind of set aside and go, he's going to act out. But I want his company. I enjoy all of these things. This is who he is at this time, and I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to stop stressing or hoping that he's going to change, because this, at some, he hasn't, you've known, and there's so much help for him if he chooses it. I had put the Sex Addiction 101 work group. It's not enough, not at all, and I put the Navigating 12. Like, there's so much stuff that he could do if he was willing to do it. Um, I agree with Troy that it's not that you're just staying. It's that he hasn't learned another way, and there hasn't been negative enough consequences. He hasn't made the news yet locally or whatever. I mean, like, people have some really serious crises because of the acting out behavior, and that hasn't happened to him, at least yet. So perhaps it's just accepting that this is who he is, And I'm going to enjoy all of these parts, make sure that I'm taking care of me, my safety, my financial safety, my physical safety for sure, and emotional. Like he's going to act out. I'm not going to let that rock my world. I'm not going to be focused on his behaviors or what he's doing or not doing. I'm going to focus on, okay, we're together. We really, really want to be together, and yeah, and just accept it. And I hear substandard, but maybe that's like you really love each other. You want to spend time together. Maybe it's not substandard. It's not that he's living in recovery and striving for being an honest and man of integrity, and that's okay. If that if that can work for you, that's okay. So everybody chooses their path. You guys have been together a long time. You grew up together. No offense, at 16, not grown up. So you grew up together. You've created this whole life together, and he could change if he chose to. So I will hold that lifeline out there that there is help if he chooses it. And we would welcome the opportunity to work with him and with you, for residential help to get that solid foundation. Because, recovery takes 2 to 5 years if he's doing the work. But if he's not doing the work, then there's no traction in that. So, okay, the next one. If you are constantly being injured by your betrayer, I think no amount of skills will help you heal. Comment? I just agree. Like, what do you think?
Well, I'm gonna post a video that I made like 8 years ago. In the So if you want to go check it out, it's like dealing with toxic people. Um, Skills like having boundaries is a skill that will help you heal. But here's the thing: it's it's not the wounds that cause us suffering. It's what we've come to believe about ourselves, and that includes betrayal. So, what do I end up believing about myself when my partner lies, when my partner continues to cheat, when my partner um, holds back from being honest? Like, what do I end up believing about myself? And this is a really challenging thing, I think, for a lot of betrayed partners to go through because it feels so personal. Like when you're in the grocery store and your partner's like checking somebody out, like, oh, like that is so painful. It feels so personal. In part because there's stories being told, there's shadows of shame stories that you are hearing in your head that are probably not true, about you in response to them. But when we're able to learn how to change those stories, that I know that I'm enough, that I know that I'm worthy of love, I know that I am worthy of respect, I know that I am worthy of being treated with honesty. And when I inherently believe that, and my partner keeps doing his thing, I'm able to understand that, hey, that's his problem. And I'm not going to take it personally anymore. Now that you may choose to stay in the relationship, and I know people who do, and they are able to find peace and healing because they are able to not connect that with their truth and their identity. That is hard to do, but it is possible. And then there's others who choose to leave because they're like, I am worthy enough to be in a relationship or not be in a relationship where this is happening. Uh, so there are things that you can do to heal it. The end of the day, your wounds are yours. People ask me all the time, how how do you do what you do as a therapist? All day, every day, people come in and they share their trauma and they share their hurt. Like, how do you hear all that and like not collapse into a puddle at the end of the day? And I learned a long time ago that they come in with their wounds and they show me their owies. They show me their scab on their arm, and they show me, their stitches that they got in their leg or whatever. Um, their heart is broken. They show that to me, and we meet and we talk, and I hold space, and then they leave. And guess what? They leave with their wounds. They can't leave them here. Physically, spiritually, and emotionally, energetically, they can't leave their wounds with me. They're theirs. They got to take them with them. And when they come back, I'll hold space for them. And that really helped me learn, like, I don't have to carry that. And it's the same principle here. Like, those, your wounds are yours, and your spouse's wounds or your partner's wounds are his. So your betrayal wound is yours. And so if I'm wanting him to do things to treat my wounds and he's not, well, that's one strategy, but there's a million other strategies because this is mine. And I need to figure out the ways to tend to and care for my wounds so it can heal, which has absolutely nothing to do with what he does.
Yeah, we're not saying any of this is easy, because if you're in a relationship and things are happening, like it does. It hurts my feelings, oh, it hurts, all of those wounds. I cracked up when Troy said, massive abandonment and rejection wounds. Those are my two biggest ones too. And when those get poked, I know, but now I have the language to go, oh, that's my abandonment wound getting poked, or that's my rejection wound getting poked. And instead of going, oh, I go, oh, that's what it is, and here's what I can do to to keep my brain involved in it so I can make a choice. That's what I'm looking for, is how can I make a choice, a decision, so that I'm choosing how I act and react to it rather than collapsing in a puddle. So it doesn't keep all of that away, but it does. I was thinking when Troy was talking, it's like the 10,000 feet up. I can see it all happening, but it isn't happening, like it isn't pummeling me. And that's a gift, to be able to, to do that. And it takes work, it just takes work to get to that place. But and especially when you're in the relationship, to start to be able to do that. And again, I shared like the boundaries, class for partners is amazing. Debbie McCrae does that. Consider that. But the healthier boundaries you have for you, then you're able to pay. Then you don't. I love when partners get to the place where I will not betray myself by allowing all of this to ruin my day and everything else. I'm going to choose. So, I mean, that's a really empowered place to be. So, okay. The next question, Troy, is I am the betrayed. My husband is a sex addict. Discovery was July of last year. What are your opinions on ketamine treatment for the trauma?
Ketamine has been shown to have some really great ways of treating depression and trauma. What I would hope is that you are going to a qualified provider who does that, and there are places all around the country that are. Um, so making sure that you're working with a doctor, caregiver, and there's different ways to get it. There's different ways to get it. Some they they do a like a nasal spray. You can get it IV. I'll tell you an anecdotal experience. I have a client who has medication resistant depression, and
Mm,
for a long time, like none of the medications were helping her, and she was feeling depressed. And I would have her, when she'd come in, I'd have her like mark how she's doing, and it was always in the dumps. And then she decided to do IV ketamine, and so she went for a week, and they did it for like 4 hours every day, and and then she came back and she said, I just don't think that it helped. Well, then I showed her her scores, and her scores for like sense of well-being and overall happiness had increased significantly and had stayed the same for a long time, for like months. And she's like,
mm.
I just don't think it was helping. And I'm like, well, let me show you this. And the difference was that she couldn't handle the physical symptoms because it makes you throw up and all kinds of stuff. So she didn't continue. But even then, like that change things. So I've seen it firsthand with people, but she did go to a qualified clinic with somebody who had been trained in how to treat that. So we're learning a lot about the way that we can treat trauma, and that's one of them. So
And there's a number of CSATs that have that. So qualified and ideally someone who understands betrayal trauma. Because there's a lot of people that just, you go in and then it's not qualified. So having that, and one more thing with that, there's a number of, like, not just ketamine, but like, like doing EMDR or something like that along with it. There's, other things that can be done in conjunction with that can, help too. So uh, for people like, you're the betrayed. For people who have had substance issues, make sure that you have somebody who's completely aware of all of the things, because there, can be some problems within that. As a person in recovery for substances, like, I will choose not to do it. I believe that it can help a lot of people. It's really it's not worth it to me to choose to do that. So making sure you're an informed consumer. How's that? Okay. The Friday group is amazing. Wayward husband here. Is there a proven strategy that can more or less eliminate my bad habit of noticing and instantly evaluating women based on their physical attributes? I've really broken the habit of going to fantasy, but the evaluation is so instantaneous and hurtful to my spouse. 2 years sober, lots of work done.
so there's the 3 second rule. With a caveat to that. So if you've never heard of the 3 second rule, it's if you notice somebody that's attractive, you have 3 seconds to move your eyes and look away, and then you don't look back. So that's in a nutshell what the 3 second rule is.
But you don't get to ogle for 3 seconds. It's
No,
in
right,
the 3 seconds, I'm moving and
right.
thinking good things about them. And, they're somebody's sister, daughter, if it's a white,
That's
woman.
right.
So
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the
So yeah,
that's the caveat, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just looking away. We want to add a piece to that process of thinking, okay, uh, you can do lots of things in those 3 seconds. I'm thinking about my wife. What's something that I'm grateful for about my wife? How can I turn this person into a human instead of an object? So how can I remember that this is somebody's mother or daughter or whatever? What you're doing is you're wanting to this is a behavioral technique. I'm moving away and I want to add a new component. I want to add a point of what I'm grateful for about my wife. I want to add something so that it's not just looking away, but I'm wanting to connect some neurons together to help build that, so that eventually, once that neuron is built, when you see somebody, the immediate thought is my wife. Like, I'm not even seeing that over there. I'm thinking about my wife. So that's a behavioral tool that you can use, where every time you do it, it reinforces that behavior, and you learn how to do that. um, I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head, but that is a way to do that. I remember listening to a guy who was into meditation a lot, and he get and they do this Seeking Integrity Inpatient. They take the guys out to the beach, and like freaking, like, oh my gosh, so many triggers. And the guy, as he's telling it, he's like, so, what would it be like to go out on the beach? And like all these guys in recovery were freaking out, like, I don't know how I could handle all that. And he says, once, when you learn, and he uses meditation as that way of doing that, when you learn to be able to be still within yourself, you can go on the beach and you can see the ocean. You can hear the sounds. You're not really paying attention to all the people that are around. You are at peace with you. But it takes practice. And so that's the thing is, I mean, I'm going to keep trying over and over. And sometimes I'm going to fail, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to pick myself back up again, and I'm going to try again. But that's the thing. We want to tie something positive to this behavior of looking away instead of just feeling shame every time.
So I'm going to add, I love the book ending where, like, I know I'm going out. I know this is a vulnerability. So I'm going to text my sponsor. I'm going to remind myself of my mission is to go to the grocery store. I'm going to go get, the items on my list. I'm not there to ogle anybody. Um, and then I'm going to be back in contact with my sponsor at the end so that I bookended it. I'm at the beginning and the end. And it's called intentionality. Like if we are intentional, if I'm going on my mission to go to the grocery store, if I have a vulnerability with, when I'm out with my wife and she gets really upset, then we're gonna have a thing. Maybe she taps your hand, just to notice. Okay, like whatever. Having a plan and into implementing the plan, but just it would be difficult to change that behavior if that's what you're used to without creating the intention and the plan. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we have like, so one is, this is back from the 50 years. He has and is a lot of recovery work now for himself, not just for me. That's great. And
Love
yeah,
that.
and for one more minute, because I got another meeting in a minute, but don't
Yep,
you think it takes time to detach?
it can. I mean, I have so many people who like they've broken up with their partner, but they still carry them around all the time. I actually had a client who I made her carry a Ken doll around in her purse. And every time she would get into her purse, she would see him and she's like, oh my gosh, that's so annoying to help realize like this is somebody I don't want in my life, but I'm still carrying him around. So it can, but it doesn't have to. There are some people who are like, I'm done with you and I'm just done. So it kind of depends on what you're still tied to with that person.
Okay, we are out of time. And thank you so much. Come back. He'll be here again at the end of February. Or if you're a guy, join him on the drop in group on Friday. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Troy. Great to see you. Bye.